Most people look at a Chihuahua and see the smallest dog in the room, a tiny body, huge ears, big eyes, and an attitude that sometimes seems completely disconnected from reality. But Chihuahuas are not simply small dogs. Their history, their instincts, their bodies, and even the way they attach themselves to people make them surprisingly different from almost every other breed. Some of these facts sound impossible. Others explain things your Chihuahua has been doing for years, and the last few might completely change the way you look at that little dog sleeping next to you tonight. Let's get into it. Your Chihuahua is carrying a piece of ancient Mexico around with them. The Chihuahua is one of the oldest recognized breeds in the Americas. Long before tiny dogs were being carried around in handbags, dogs resembling the Chihuahua existed in ancient Mexico. The Toltecs kept a small dog known as the Techichi, and later the Aztecs became closely associated with these little dogs. Exactly how the modern Chihuahua developed is still debated, but one thing is clear. This breed didn't appear because somebody suddenly decided that tiny dogs were cute. Its story goes back centuries. The dog sitting on your sofa today belongs to a lineage connected to civilizations that existed long before modern dog shows, designer breeds, or even the idea of a Chihuahua as a fashionable companion. So when your Chihuahua stares at you like they own the house, technically they come from a dog with a very long history of being important to people. And that history gets even stranger. They were once believed to help the dead reach the afterlife. This is one of the strangest chapters in Chihuahua history. Among the Aztecs, these small dogs had a spiritual role. There was a belief that a dog's spirit could help guide a person's soul through the afterlife. Chihuahuas weren't simply animals people kept around the house. They could have religious and cultural significance. Dogs were sometimes sacrificed and buried or cremated with their owners because of these beliefs. Imagine that for a moment. The tiny creature currently demanding food from you at 6 in the morning comes from a lineage that people once believed could guide the dead into the next world.
Suddenly, that dramatic little stare feels slightly more appropriate.
They're one of the smallest dogs, but they don't behave like one. The Chihuahua standard calls for a dog weighing no more than 6 pounds. That's smaller than many people's cats. And yet Chihuahuas often behave as if size is merely a suggestion. They'll challenge dogs several times their size. They'll patrol the house. They'll announce strangers. They'll defend their favorite person. And sometimes they'll walk into a room with the confidence of an animal 10 times their size. This isn't necessarily because your Chihuahua doesn't understand how small they are. It's because confidence doesn't come with a measuring tape. The Chihuahua's personality was never designed to match its body, and that's exactly why this breed can be so entertaining. Those enormous ears aren't just there to make them look cute. Look at a Chihuahua from across the room. The ears are almost impossible to miss, but those large, upright ears are part of what gives the breed such an expressive appearance, and they also help create one of the most recognizable Chihuahua behaviors, the instant reaction. A sound happens outside, the ears go up. A door moves, the ears rotate. You whisper something from another room, and somehow your Chihuahua already knows. Their entire face can change in a fraction of a second. That's one reason Chihuahuas often look like they're constantly investigating the world, because they are. They were built to be alert. And your Chihuahua may be tiny, but they're rarely unaware. Their heads are one of the strangest things about them. That famous rounded apple head isn't an accident. It's one of the defining characteristics of the breed. And some Chihuahuas are born with a soft spot in the skull called a molera, where the bones haven't completely joined. This can look alarming to someone who doesn't know what they're seeing. For many Chihuahuas, however, this is a recognized feature of the breed. It's one of those things that makes the Chihuahua physically unusual compared with many other dogs. So the next time you look at that oversized head sitting on that tiny body, remember that you're looking at one of the breed's most distinctive pieces of anatomy. And that leads to something even more surprising. Their tiny body can make their brain look almost ridiculously large. You've probably heard the claim that Chihuahuas have one of the largest brain-to-body ratios among dogs. The exact ranking mind depends on how brain size and body size are measured, so the internet version of this fact is often exaggerated. But the basic idea explains something Chihuahua owners already know. These dogs can be extremely alert, quick to learn, and surprisingly good at figuring out what gets a reaction from their humans. And here's the part nobody tells you. Your Chihuahua doesn't necessarily need to understand a complicated command to understand you. They learn patterns. You reach for your shoes, they know something is happening.
You walk toward the kitchen, they follow. You pick up the leash, suddenly they're ready. And if barking gets them what they want, they may remember that too. Your Chihuahua isn't just learning commands, they're learning you. They can be incredibly athletic, despite looking like they belong in a handbag. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about the breed. People see a Chihuahua and assume fragile, but Chihuahuas can be fast, energetic, and surprisingly athletic. They can participate in agility and obedience. They can learn tricks. They can run. They can play, and some of them will happily spend 10 minutes chasing a toy around the house before suddenly collapsing onto your lap like they've just completed an Olympic event. The body is tiny. The engine isn't. That's why treating a Chihuahua like a decorative object can actually be a mistake. Underneath all that cuteness is still a dog that needs movement, stimulation, training, and something interesting to do.
They don't just choose a favorite person. They can become intensely attached to one. A Chihuahua may love the entire family, but sometimes there is one person. The person they follow from room to room. The person they wait for. The person they stare at. The person whose lap is apparently better than every other surface in the house. And once that bond forms, it can become incredibly strong. This is one reason Chihuahuas can seem almost like shadows. It can look like clinginess, but for the Chihuahua, proximity is often part of the relationship. Your presence is information. Your presence is comfort. And sometimes your presence is the entire point.
Their shaking doesn't always mean they're scared. This is one of the most misunderstood Chihuahua behaviors. A trembling Chihuahua can look terrified, but shaking can happen for several reasons. Cold, excitement, stress, arousal, anticipation, and simply being a very small dog with a small body that can lose heat quickly. So when your Chihuahua starts vibrating before you even open the treat cupboard, don't automatically assume they're afraid. They may simply have reached maximum Chihuahua excitement. Of course, sudden or unusual trembling can also be a sign that something is wrong, so it shouldn't always be dismissed. But the next time your Chihuahua shakes because they know you're about to take them outside, remember that sometimes the tiny body is simply struggling to contain the giant emotion happening inside it.
They can turn barking into a full-time occupation. Some breeds bark. Chihuahuas can appear to have made it their profession. A noise outside? Bark. Someone walks past the window? Bark. A package arrives? Emergency meeting. A leaf moves? National security alert. But there's something important behind this. Chihuahuas are highly alert dogs, and their small size doesn't stop them from reacting to things they perceive as threats or changes in their environment. The problem is that humans often accidentally reward the behavior. The dog barks, the owner reacts. The Chihuahua learns that barking produces a response, and suddenly, the little dog has discovered a very powerful communication system. That's why training matters, because the same intelligence that makes a Chihuahua capable of becoming an excellent little companion can also make them extremely good at training their humans. They can be surprisingly stubborn because they know exactly what they want. You tell your Chihuahua to come, they look at you. You repeat it. They look at you again. Then they slowly walk in the opposite direction. And somehow, you know they heard every word. Chihuahuas can be self-willed. They're intelligent, but intelligence doesn't automatically mean obedience. In fact, sometimes the smartest dog in the room is the one asking, "What's in it for me?" Positive training works particularly well because you can turn that motivation into cooperation. Give them a reason. Make the behavior rewarding. And suddenly, the dog who ignored you for 5 minutes becomes an enthusiastic student. The Chihuahua isn't necessarily incapable of learning. Sometimes they simply want to negotiate the contract first. They have a very different relationship with warmth. There's a reason your Chihuahua burrows underneath blankets. There's a reason they seek the warmest spot in the house. There's a reason some of them become extremely unhappy when temperatures drop. They're tiny dogs. They have very little body mass compared with larger breeds, and they can lose body heat quickly. And the breed developed in Mexico
where warm conditions were far more familiar than freezing winter weather. So when your Chihuahua crawls under the blanket and leaves only the nose sticking out, they aren't being dramatic. Well, they might still be dramatic, but they're also doing exactly what a very small dog does when it wants to stay warm.
They can be extremely expressive without saying a word. A Chihuahua can communicate with almost their entire face. The ears change, the eyes change, the head tilts, the body freezes, the tail moves, and suddenly you know exactly what they're thinking. Or at least you think you do. That expressiveness is part of why Chihuahua owners often describe their dogs as almost human. They don't simply look at you, they give you a look. And every Chihuahua owner knows the difference. There's the, "Where are you going?" The, "Why did you close that door?" The, "I heard a noise." The, "You ate without me?" And, of course, the, "You said one treat." It's almost impossible to live with a Chihuahua without eventually becoming fluent in facial expressions.
They can be protective of someone many times their size. This is where Chihuahua confidence becomes almost ridiculous. A person walks toward their owner. The Chihuahua may immediately become alert. A larger dog approaches. The Chihuahua may decide that this is now a personal matter. And sometimes, the smallest dog in the room becomes the first one to volunteer for security duty. But this doesn't mean every Chihuahua is naturally aggressive. There's a huge difference between aggression, fear, territorial behavior, excitement, and simply being highly alert. A Chihuahua that is properly socialized and trained can be a confident, adaptable companion. The problem starts when owners excuse every unwanted behavior because he's tiny. He can't hurt anyone. That's how a 6-pound dog ends up believing he runs the entire neighborhood. And sometimes he actually does.
They can live much longer than many large breeds. This is one of the biggest differences between a Chihuahua and a giant dog. Chihuahuas commonly have long lifespans, with the AKC listing an expected lifespan around 14 to 16 years. Some live even longer. That means bringing home a Chihuahua can mean signing up for a relationship that lasts through an enormous part of your life. Your Chihuahua may be there through different homes, different jobs, different relationships, different stages of your life. And while nobody gets enough time with a dog, with a Chihuahua, that little companion can be beside you for many years. That's one reason the bond can become so powerful. They're not just a dog you have for a few years. They can become a witness to your life.
Their tiny size can actually make them easier to take everywhere, but that doesn't mean they need less from you. A Chihuahua can fit into spaces where larger dogs simply can't. They can live comfortably in apartments. They can travel with you. They don't require a huge yard, and they're easy to physically carry when necessary. But there's a trap here. People see a tiny dog and assume tiny responsibility. It's the opposite. Because Chihuahuas are so small, owners sometimes let them get away with behaviors they would never tolerate from a larger dog. Jumping, barking, snapping, guarding, ignoring commands, and overprotectiveness. A Great Dane doing it would be taken seriously. A Chihuahua doing it gets laughed off. But your Chihuahua doesn't know they're supposed to be a joke. They're learning from every reaction you give them. So yes, they may fit inside your bag, but they still need to be raised like a dog.
They can look like lap dogs while secretly being little athletes. This is the Chihuahua contradiction. They may spend half the afternoon curled up against you and then suddenly explode across the room at full speed. They can be affectionate, then independent, calm, then chaotic, sleepy, then completely insane because you touched their favorite toy. That's why trying to describe the Chihuahua with one personality trait doesn't work. They're not simply lapdogs. They're not simply yappy. They're not simply clingy. They're not simply independent. They're a combination of contradictions. And that's exactly what makes them so difficult to replace.
They don't understand that they're supposed to be small. Watch a Chihuahua walk. There's something almost funny about the confidence. Head up, ears alert, eyes forward, tiny legs moving with complete certainty. They don't walk like a miniature version of a large dog. They walk like a Chihuahua. And that distinction matters because somewhere along the way, the breed developed one of the most recognizable personalities in the dog world. A dog can weigh only a few pounds and still have enough confidence to challenge something 10 times its size. That doesn't mean we should encourage reckless behavior. It means their emotional world doesn't shrink just because their body did. They can be brave. They can be fearful. playful. They can be jealous. They can be affectionate. They can be protective.
They can be stubborn. They can be hilarious. They can feel everything. Just like the much larger dogs, they seem convinced they are.
Your Chihuahua may be tiny, but to them, you can be their entire world. And this is the reason Chihuahuas are truly different. It's easy to laugh at the size, the shaking, the barking, the dramatic attitude, the way they steal your spot on the couch and somehow make you feel guilty for wanting it back. But underneath all of that is a dog that can form an incredibly close relationship with its person. Your Chihuahua knows your routine. They recognize your voice. They learn your movements. They know what the sound of your keys means. They know when you're leaving. They know when you're coming home. And eventually, they learn things about you that you never consciously taught them. That's why your Chihuahua may follow you from room to room, why they wait for you, why they want to sleep next to you, why they can become upset when your routine changes. To you, they're one small part of your life, but to your Chihuahua, you may be most of their world. And maybe that's the biggest difference of all, because the Chihuahua may be one of the smallest dogs on earth, but they were never small in the ways that actually matter. They have an ancient history, a huge personality, a remarkable ability to learn, a body that seems almost comically small for the confidence inside it, and a capacity to become deeply attached to the person they trust most. So the next time your Chihuahua climbs onto your lap and looks at you with those enormous eyes, don't just see a tiny dog. See the centuries of history, the instincts, the personality, the strange little behaviors, and the completely unique creature that somehow decided that you were their person. And now I want to know something. What is the most ridiculous thing your Chihuahua does that makes absolutely no sense to anyone else? Tell me in the comments, because every Chihuahua owner eventually realizes the same thing. You don't really choose a Chihuahua. At some point, the Chihuahua chooses you. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more Chihuahua stories, facts, and things every Chihuahua owner should know. And if you want even more Chihuahua content, join our newsletter and become a member of the channel. You'll get extra tips, exclusive content, and things I don't always cover here on YouTube, because living with a Chihuahua is never boring, and there's always another strange little thing about them waiting to be discovered.